Welcome to Faith Fondue, a podcast featuring author and speaker Haley DeMaria and teacher and blogger Ann Strickers. Faith Fondue will feature a melting pot of topics ignited by a flame, our faith, and guided by the Holy Spirit. It's the week of June 27th. We are just finishing up the first official week of summer after last week's summer solstice. It's also the 13th Sunday in Ordinary Time. Hi, Ann. Happy last week of June.
Hi, Haley. Good to be with you. And a couple things. In this week's episode, we will discuss USNA. We'll fill people in on the acronym, what that stands for, swim camp, Las Vegas, returning to the gym, this Sunday's gospel, and this sense of to be a Christian means to know a God of surprises. I look forward to putting those topics over our little melting pot. But you said it's the first week of summer, and I think that's so appropriate because you had told me you just came from the pool and how nice that must be, because summer is certainly a time to go swimming, right, and to use the pool. And here in San Francisco, it's definitely summer. I'm wearing probably 3 layers right now. It's been cloudy and gray, and that's our summer. So if I want to go to a pool, I have to leave the city. But I want to also thank you. In our last episode, it did come up for me a couple times this past week. People were like, is today the first day of summer? Is it Tuesday? And I said, oh no, it was on Sunday night because this came up while we were recording. So yes, I hope the first week of summer has been a good week.
Yeah, it was. And it is warm here. Maryland summers are not quite as hot as the Arizona summers that I'm used to, but let me tell you, they are definitely more muggy. So it is hot and sticky. But summer for me is in June has always meant, or at least over the last 12 years, has meant USNA swim camp. So that's United States Naval Academy swim camp. So back in 2010, I was first asked to speak at the Naval Academy swim camps. They run 2 sessions every June. I've spoken at both sessions every June for the past, 11 times over the past 12 years, because of course we didn't have them last year. And, it's one of my favorite talks to do because, I have the good fortune of sharing my story everywhere at a lot of different places. But there's something about sharing it in your hometown that's kind of special. It's just, it's kind of like a regular day, but then it's a special night to do it. And of course, swimmers are an easy group to talk to. But, it's interesting because a lot of these swim campers come to Navy swim camp year after year. This isn't just something that people come to once. And some people stay for both sessions. So some people will actually not only hear me year after year, but will sometimes hear me twice in the same month. So after the first few years of doing these swim camps, I realized that when I started seeing some of the same kids and recognizing them, and I thought, okay, I tell the same story every time. What does that mean for them? So I started talking to some of the kids who had heard me speak before, and I realized, and it was really interesting. They're a year older. They're at a different place in their life. They've had a whole year of growth and experiences, whether it's in the pool or out of the pool, that really kind of makes them a different person. And it's been really fascinating to talk to some of these campers who have heard me speak year after year and to hear the different things that they take from it, which is kind of fun. And, in particular this year, there was a young girl who had heard me speak before, and she came up to me afterwards. And this is why, I can't say this is why I love what I do, but this is why the giving talks and sharing my story for me is so meaningful. She started to break down before she could even really get too many words out, and just shared with me that she had had a back injury. Because of course I haven't been at camp now for 2 years speaking, and she carried my book around for 3 months while she was recovering. And she said it was the one thing that got her through it. And I thought, I've spoken at this swim camp 22 times. And, like anything, I'm sure you are the same way sometimes with teaching and coaching. You kind of think, am I making a difference? Why am I doing this year after year? Is anybody listening? I mean, not to that extreme or that extent sometimes, but I thought, you know what, this is why I do it. In 22 times speaking, this is why. This is why I keep coming back year after year. She's heard me speak before, but it was a much different experience for her this time. And I think that speaks to anything we do. You never know who's listening. You never know who's out there. You never know whose life you're going to touch, whether it's in the grocery store or teaching or coaching or working or at church or giving a talk. We are just called to be where we are called to be, and we need to heed that call. So that was my very cool flame this week. Love going to Naval Academy swim camps, and certainly when it's meaningful like that, that's about as good as it gets.
That's so inspiring, Haley. And I think of, working with high school kids, how much growth happens per year, how literally different a freshman to a sophomore to a junior to a senior is. And, when you become an adult, there's obviously different phases in your life, but when you're so young, each year is such, an impact. We reread certain books, we rewatch certain movies, not because they change, but because we do. Mm-hmm. And I think that's so true. So for those young people who hear your story again, like you said, they bring to the table a different, who knows what they've happened, who knows in 2 years time what's happened. And it is a gift to be reaffirmed. And I actually think it is important to ask ourselves those questions that you're saying, like, am I good at this? Does anyone need this? Am I making an impact? I think if we don't ask those questions, we're kind of sleepwalking or just making assumptions. And to get that small affirmation is such a gift. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, it was. Thank you. You're welcome. We all need those affirmations.
I know. Now, are these swimmers, are they interested in going to the Naval Academy?
Some of them are. Yeah. I mean, that's one reason. And they run, the age is it's probably 8 to 18. And some of them are. It's a great way to be seen by the coaches. They bring in other college coaches as part of the coaching staff for these camps. So you get exposed to actually a lot of different college coaches. But yeah, I would imagine some of them are.
Well, as another Notre Dame alum, Navy plays Fighting Irish in football every year. And my dad has always reminded me how he just has such respect for those football players because they're not getting necessarily a scholarship. Now you would know this they're middies, but
midshipmen.
Is that what they're referred to? The undergrad students?
Yes.
Okay. Midshipmen and women, do they have to participate in a physical activity?
They do. They have to do some sort of sport. So they could do a varsity sport, they could do a club sport, they could play an intramural sport, they could box, they could lift weight. They do have to do some sort of physical activity.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. I mean, part of their work is that they're physically fit and service. So they're to be commended. And Father Hesburgh made that pledge that we would always play. We, being Notre Dame, always play the Naval Academy because really the Naval Academy kept Notre Dame open during the war and just as a sign of respect. So I think everybody in attendance at that game, every time I've gone, whether it was in San Diego or, 1 year it was in Philadelphia or obviously at home, there is just that mutual respect between,
Yeah, it is my favorite game of the year by far.
Yeah. Well, interesting Notre Dame connection. Not to belabor our love for the university here, but this past week I was in Las Vegas and I mentioned Notre Dame because I went to visit a dear friend. But the irony is that she was my high school friend. She was my doubles partner in high school for tennis. And I am the only female from my class to have gone to Notre Dame. And there was one boy, and I've talked about my high school situation from De La Salle. So, going to Notre Dame was, a long way and it was, uncommon. At any rate, my friend was a year behind me. And so not only did we go to high school together, we went to college together. And then her first cousin, who's also my good friend, was at our high school and she went to Notre Dame. So there was 5 of us together Monday through Wednesday. we got to visit my friend in Las Vegas because her husband works for the Raiders. So we got a tour of the new stadium. Really, we were there to see her and her family and their home. And it was just so awesome to have that opportunity to all gather. People think Las Vegas and, we're there Monday through Wednesday. So we didn't raise too much, hell or anything. But we had a great time just being together. And there's a quote, it's on like cards and different pillows, but it says the cure for anything is salt water, tears, sweat, or the sea. And, there was no sea because Las Vegas is kind of in a desert, but there definitely was sweat because it was about 111 the day we arrived. Now I can't lie. I wasn't dying. Like when they say it's a dry heat, it is a different heat. So it's okay. I'm talking to someone who grew up in Arizona, so you already know this. And the second day was much cooler. It registered at 95, but it really felt like 80, I think. And we went to this place called Red Rock Canyon for a hike. So there was a little bit of sweat. It's a beautiful area. These red rocks, this formation, the geology really reminded me of one of my favorite books, Desert Solitaire by Edward Abbey. So I might need to reread that. That's more about Zion National Park, where a lot of Americans went during COVID. So there was this sweat and there's always tears. You get 5 women together at some point. Everybody has their moment in sharing. And it's just, one of the great parts of, I just feel like being a woman is that we are free to express our emotions with our friends. And, again, each of us at some point had some tears. So it was a good time to recharge.
Yeah, there is nothing better. And it's, I think when you talk to a lot of people who are involved with some sort of a community like that, whether it's Notre Dame, whether it's, where you work now, where it's where I work now, whether it's our church, people ask you why you love it. And you say, the community, the relationships. There's really nothing better.
Yeah. And, old friends are special. So we hang on to those.
Yeah.
Now, when I got back, I went to a place I used to go to all the time. And I am wondering how many of our listeners can relate to this. So I went to my gym for the first time since March of 2020. Now, again, I'm in California, so I know that different places may have had different rules, but June 15th was the big day, the reveal day in California, where you didn't necessarily have to wear masks indoors if you're vaccinated. So I just really, Haley, I did not want to work out with the mask on. Obviously I got my vaccine early. And I was excited to be back, but I learned to lift when I was a rower at Notre Dame, and I've always enjoyed it. I don't know, it's very cerebral to me. It's just kind of that time. It's a little more quiet. Like I hop on the treadmill just to warm up, walking. And then I don't do anything major. Like there's no massive squatting or deadlifts, that are going to crush any records, but it's just so good for your body and it's great to be there. And then the best part, speaking of community, is just running into people. I mean, you just chat it up. At least I do when I'm at the gym with, regulars. The only downside of this is getting out of bed on Friday. I was so sore. I was so stiff from the lunges.
Oh, okay. But Anne, I got to tell you, so I love that feeling.
Everybody says that to me. Haley.
I know. And, my husband, it took him 45 years to find something that he loved to do, to work out. He does not like to work out. 3 years ago, he found something that he loves, and he's been working out for 3 years, and it's been amazing. And he has these aches and pains, all the time. And, he wants sympathy for it. And I keep saying, yeah, but doesn't it feel good? He's like, no, my ASS hurts. And he's complaining about his glutes. And, I love that feeling. And I don't know if it's because I've never really hurt that badly and I need to work out a little harder, or I don't know. It's just a sense of accomplishment that I worked out so hard that my body aches. I don't know. I like to think of it as success as opposed to just getting older and being out of shape.
Yeah. Well, anyone who wants that feeling, I encourage you to stop lifting for 15 months and then go back to it.
Sit at home for 15 months and then jump back to the gym.
I found it very humbling though, because And as someone who teaches a class called Sports and Spirituality, I'm trying to find the analogy, and I'm like, you don't use something for 15 months, like, and then you reuse it. Like, I wasn't expecting to feel great, but I wasn't expecting to feel that sore. And I'm not someone who was inactive during COVID. I certainly walked, hiked, and played a lot of golf, but I wasn't doing lunges whatsoever. I did, I had the option. You can do lunges, and you don't even need weights to do lunges. So there is no excuse. But it was very humbling, and I've thought about, people who don't use a language, they talk about losing it right away, or
Right.
I don't know. There's probably some analogies here to kind of play with. I mean, our God is a gracious God. So, we can, people, prodigal son, or we can be gone. And it's not necessarily hard to get back. I mean, I really believe that, like, God is that gracious that there's not this pain, that I felt, or stiffness. But in a lot of things in life, yeah, you don't just get it back that quickly. So this is a helpful reminder, at least for me. So,
Well, and even though God welcomes us back quickly, when you get out of that routine of going to mass or even praying, it does take
yeah,
some time to get back into it where you're doing it so that it's comfortable all the time. So it
yeah,
does take some work too.
yeah. Yeah, my dad's been watching Mass on TV, and he loves it because of the closed captioning, is what he always says. And so I said, "Oh, Mom, did you go to Mass today?" And I mean, my home is like every Sunday. It's not even a question. And she's like, "Are they open again?" And I was like, "Yeah, since June 15th." And she was saying, "Well, I thought you had to sign up." And I was like, "Nope, again, June 15, Mom, we're good to go." And she said, "I have to get back into that routine." And then I was trying to figure out
Yeah.
my schedule for today. And I said, "Okay, Mom, well, next week I'll go back when you go back." So, just a small encouragement. So I was in this 2-day golf tournament, and I played the second day this morning. And the timing, I love my 8 a.m. mass. It just didn't work out. And I literally say to myself, I don't want golf to be my religion. I really mean that, like, in jest and in sincerity. Like, I don't want it to be the priority in my life. But yeah, it just didn't allow for that. So I was going to try to go this evening. I live in a place where I have so many options. I realize there are Americans and people in the world that don't have the option of many times. So yeah, it takes a little spiritual muscle to get your butt out the door, this evening. And there's a 9 p.m. that I used to go to quite a bit, last chance mass, but it's there. So we'll see. I think the odds are against me going, Haley, but I don't know. We'll see.
Well,
Just
well,
this week. Just this week.
there's
Yeah.
always next week.
Next week is the 4th of July. So I think that would be, the national holiday overlapping with, a Sunday. Like, I always go on Thanksgiving. I love going on Thanksgiving Day. Yeah, why not go on 4th of July, right? Bless our country.
Right. Can't have fireworks in the morning. It's easy to go to mass then.
Right, right. Yeah, we could, yeah, I know. Sing God Bless America or something at the end. Who knows? So,
So how was your golf tournament?
it was good. Golf is not only physical, but it's very mental. And I do feel the struggle. I play in a tournament like this because, to me as a coach, I like to know what my own golfers are going through. As a tennis player, I did struggle with the mental aspect of the game when it's like the pressure's on, like, how do you handle the pressure? So I'd be curious that your perspective on that as a swimmer, like how you handled the pressure. Because tennis is so different. There's offense and defense, but there's the scoring. And then in golf, you take a certain approach. How are you going to manage the course? So today, like, I put a lot of pressure on myself yesterday, and there's no excuses because I know the course. If you play at another place, you can say, well, I didn't really know the course. No, I know the course. And then today I was so much looser and, played fine, not great, but you feel that it's a different energy than when you're just having fun.
Yeah, and I do think all sports are mental. I
Yes.
actually think it's right on par and even with the physical aspect of any sport. I do think it's different. Individual sports are much different than team sports in terms
Mhm.
of the mental game because
Yeah.
it's an individual sport, it's just you. And then you have a sport like baseball where it's kind of this team sport with very individual aspects of it, right?
Yes.
When you're batting, it's just
Right.
you.
Yep.
But it is if you don't have a sharp mental game, you have no chance. I mean, not you specifically, but
Right.
athletes in general. It's such a huge part of their game. It's interesting because so many athletes get criticized at times for having egos or thinking highly of themselves or full of themselves. And I think what people don't understand is to be an elite athlete, you have to think that way.
Yes.
I mean, I knew, and I'm not considering myself an elite athlete, but even as a collegiate athlete or even a, high school state champion, I knew when I got on the starting blocks that I was going to win. Like I knew I was going to beat
Huh.
everybody in the race. I knew that. Now, it didn't always happen, but that was how I felt. That is how I approached every race. Was not even just thinking I was going to, I just knew I would.
Wow.
And and athletes have, there is no professional athlete that doesn't feel that way, that they don't
Yeah.
step on. I mean, they may not feel great
Yeah.
one day, but they know they're going to win. I think that's how you have to approach it.
Yeah.
You don't always win, but that
Yeah.
is how I
Yeah.
felt.
Right. That you are. Yeah.
I got
I
this. Yeah.
guess, I never felt the pressure when I was a rower because I just didn't feel it was like the same mental pressure. I knew it was going to be painful, but I didn't ever feel like this concentration that is required of me. Especially with so many variables and that's part of why people love golf though, because they have to think about club selection, dealing with the wind, the lie of there's so many things that you're dealing with. And again, every sport has, like, if it's basketball, who you're defending, who you're shooting against, like you have to consider all of that. So
Yeah, and obviously
yeah,
I'm not a
netting
golfer, so I don't
yeah,
understand that aspect of golf, but I
yeah,
will say um, I have a son for whom I think golf would be a great sport for him. Because he's one of those and I know a lot of people like this, they just want to take care of themselves and they want to do everything themselves and be responsible for themselves, and if they
yeah,
fail it's their own fault,
right.
and if
Yep.
and that type of person is great in an individual sport.
Yes. Yep.
If you thrive and get energized and draw energy from other people, that's an individual sport like golf is going to be really hard for you.
Yeah. Right.
My other son is like that. Like he loves that team dynamic and he just thrives on it.
Yep.
And golf is probably too narrow for him.
Mm.
So it's really interesting.
Yeah.
There's definitely personality that plays into it.
Agreed. Agreed. Yep.
And it obviously doesn't work for everyone. I'm just really bad at golf, so wouldn't work for
Well, I was
me.
thinking your son who plays baseball, is that who you're talking about, would be a good golfer?
Yes.
And then your son who plays water polo with the team sport.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
yep,
Absolutely.
I know.
You
Yeah,
got
it's fun.
that.
I mean, the variety of human personality, and that's why there are so many great sports. The sport I keep hearing about is pickleball.
Yep.
Have you played it? I
Nope.
don't. Nope, but you heard about it,
Oh yeah, and
right?
have you
Like,
tried to
about
read
it?
I've read about it and I've tried to read about the rules online. It's very complicated.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's going to be your takeaway this week.
Well, I was going to give it to you. I
Oh,
know.
okay.
Yeah. No, maybe both of us.
Yeah.
I'm writing it down. Pickleball. Yeah, but it's popular.
Yeah, it is. It's huge.
Sport of the future. What was
Uh,
that movie? Something Sport of the Future. What was that? There was
oh,
some 80s movie.
I
Yeah,
don't know.
I'll
I'll have to
write that
look
down
that up
too.
too.
Yeah.
All right. So for our spiritual stew this week, I actually, Notre Dame has this wonderful program, Faith ND, that delivers the daily gospel to your email every morning at 4:30. And it's great. I wake up to it every morning, and I actually usually don't
At
get out of
4:30?
well, I don't wake up at 4:30, but that's always the timestamp.
Yeah.
So I usually don't get out of bed before I read it. And I read today's gospel, Sunday's gospel. It's Mark 5:21 to 24. And I quite honestly found it a little strange. And it just stuck with me. It struck me in an interesting way. So a little background kind of in my last few days. I have an acquaintance. It's not someone I know well, but it's someone I've known for a very long time. I know her personally. We live in the same town, but she is a very big social media presence. So I constantly know what's going on in her life because she documents it all. Not in an obnoxious way, but just that's part of her
Yeah.
job.
Good.
And her son passed away suddenly. He's 20 years old, about
Yeah.
3 days ago now. And so I've been really consumed by this. And she has been very open about sharing her shock and her grief and her pain. And, it's just one of those things I can't possibly imagine.
Yeah.
But I've kind of been living it in real time,
Mm.
very superficially, or very kind of on the fringe, not superficially, on the
Yeah,
fringe.
right. Yeah.
So that's the context in which I read today's gospel. So
Okay.
in today's gospel, there is a story. It's a frantic father. His daughter is ill, and he begs Jesus, of course, to heal her. There's many stories like this in the Bible where Jesus is asked to heal, and he does. So he asks Jesus to heal, and at this point, the father receives word that his daughter has died. And then Jesus and the father and a few other disciples arrive at the house, and there's the passage or the words, the phrase that's used in Mark's gospel is people are weeping and wailing loudly.
Wow.
And I see that because I feel like I've been
Yeah.
reading and witnessing that from
Mm.
afar in
Yep.
my own life. So I got that. That made sense to me. But then Jesus heals the daughter, and then according to the gospel, the daughter stands up, walks around, and then Jesus, quote, gave strict orders that no one should know this and said that she should be given something to eat. So Jesus has now healed this child that clearly her death has devastated the family in ways, again, that we couldn't possibly imagine. And then Jesus heals her, doesn't want anybody to know, which maybe I could see that because Jesus is very humble. But then he says, you should give her something to eat. It just seemed strange. It didn't fit the narrative of someone who had just lost a child.
Right.
And I just it was strange. I don't know what else to say. It just
Mhm.
really struck me as strange. And we look to the Bible for stories, and they are stories. And we look to it for guidance, and we look to it for hope and support through tough times and all of that. And this gospel just lost me. I
Yeah.
got it until the end. And then
Yeah.
Jesus
Yeah.
said, give her some food. I mean, do you
Yeah.
want a donut? It was to me, it was such a strange ending.
Yeah.
So that's my spiritual stew. I clearly need to chew on that for a while.
Yeah.
No pun
Yeah.
intended.
No, I thought
With
that
the
was good
stew
play.
or the
Good play on
donut,
that.
right, that we're giving this
Yeah.
daughter. But I don't, any thoughts, Anne? It was
Yeah.
very perplexing to me.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the most important things you added to, I think, first of all, like your reaction is just, I love it because, one of the ways to pray with scripture, Ignatian contemplation invites us into the scene. And so you are mentioning, and you're supposed to pay attention to, like you mentioned the wailing, the reaction. You can hear what these people are, they're wailing, they're crying, look around the room, like, what do you see? So that's a big part of, this invitation, a way to pray with the gospel. So I think that's really important. And then the second thing that's really important with prayer is context. So you are coming to the story. We talked earlier about people coming to hear your story a year later, and you're coming to this gospel story with a friend, acquaintance who has lost a 20-year-old son and having a child that age. So yeah, just how confounding that must be. I mean, this whole story is just, it's confounding. So, Mark's gospel, it's so indicative of Mark's gospel because Mark it starts with Jesus's ministry, and it's just like a lot. It's the shortest gospel, and it's a lot of we're not going to give a lot of detail. We're going to just tell what happens. And when I taught scripture, we talked about there's kind of 4 different types of stories of Jesus and, his miracles. So one is like nature miracles. Another is healing miracles. And one of the miracles is raising people from the dead. So he does that with Elijah. Mm-hmm. He does this with this young woman, and it foreshadows his own resurrection so that he's not the first person, so to speak. He doesn't, Jesus reappears, but he's as a risen Lord. He doesn't come back alive and, walking around the room. So it's even greater, so to speak, than the precedent that's been set. But the other thing is like, that he offers food or says food, that's also the risen Jesus when he appeared to the disciples on the water, and they put out their nets into the deep, and he tells them where to go, and they come to the shore with more fish. And Jesus says, okay, let's make breakfast. Let's cook up the fish. And, Nation Contemplation invites us to go to the seashore and to have this fish cooking over charcoal or whatever their fire was. And, it's so relatable because when somebody dies, what do we often bring to them? Meals, right? And True. He is offering the meal because he is the bread of life. So he's telling them, have some food. And then that is the consistent line in all of his miracles, is to not tell anyone. And I always kind of say, the temptation is, what's in it for me? If I have a relationship with this guy, what's in it for me? Do I get to be healed? Do I get, to get my loved one back? And so he doesn't want the relationship because of what somebody can get from him. And in life, it's very true. We make friendships, acquaintances with people all the time for things that they can do for us. Right. So it's you said humility, and I completely agree with that. Yeah.
Okay. I appreciate the analogy of when someone passes away, we bring food.
Yeah.
I'll stick with that for now.
Yeah.
I think the only thing that would have been more strange was if the end of the passage would have said, give strict orders that no one should know this, and she should be given fish to eat. that might have been fish sticks. Yeah.
That's fish sticks. They're gross. Yeah. And I think, as you read more of Mark's gospel, just pay attention to kind of this pattern.
Yeah, I will.
That's, it's part of,
it's the narrative. Yeah.
The good news, she is alive. It is a mystery, why is she alive and other people that have died aren't? And why did he bring her back? And, these are real questions that people would have, why isn't my daughter back? Or, those things. So, maybe that's all the more reason to not tell other people, but
right.
Yeah, that's Jesus. But, it fits really well with what I would like to just kind of chew on for the spiritual stew. So I'm reading this, it's this like article, and part of the article references this book, What a Modern Catholic Believes About Heaven and Hell. And I'm like, whoa, all right. That's, there's
a lot in there. Yeah.
And that's not my article, but that's by Father John Shea. But his message is that we should all approach death with a capacity of surprise. Now, I had never thought of it that way. Death is tragic. It's a loss. It's profound, a profound loss. It's like, I've never thought of it with a capacity for surprise. But he says this need not be a bad thing, like whatever that means. But Father Andrew Greeley, who is a Catholic priest I love, he pushes this point further by indicating the essence of the Christian life is developing a capacity for surprise. Okay. And wonder, awe, inspiration, we are not in control. Like, this is a God of surprise. And he gives some evidence for how God is a God of surprise. So, as a Christian, it fits. God's intervention into our lives is a total and complete surprise. For example, the resurrection of Jesus totally surprised the apostles. Mm-hmm. Going back to, the Hebrew scriptures, Yahweh on Sinai caught Israel like flat-footed is what Greeley says. So, I think, Yahweh promised on Sinai, and Jesus renewed the proclamation that life is wonderful and full of surprises, the greatest of which is God's love for us. So the fact that God became flesh and dwelt among us, came in the form of a baby and the Messiah, that is a surprise. And Greeley's message is that as Christians, we are called to keep alive our faith in the possibility of surprise and bringing delightful surprise to others. So just yesterday, this woman kept telling me, people cannot lose hope. Don't lose hope. Don't ever lose hope. And she was talking about somebody was having a problem with work, and there was things that they were hoping are going to work out. And it wasn't an unrealistic hope, but she just had such a hopeful message, literally by saying that. And I thought, she's bringing delightful surprise. I wouldn't have expected her to say that, and in her own life, she was a widow. She had shared that, she had a great marriage. She just didn't think she would ever meet somebody else again because her marriage was so good. And she was in her 50s when her husband died. And so she just said, my life is good. I mean, I had a great life. And then her sister introduced her to someone, and she's married. And she said, he's just so wonderful too. And she's like, I just never thought, and so I thought, there's two examples of
That is
people.
a delightful surprise. Yeah.
Yes, right? So, yeah, we have, in salvation history, we have evidence of this God who is bringing surprise to our lives. And how do we live our lives with that in the background or in the foreground? That's, I think, part of my takeaway for the week, is to kind of think more about that.
Yeah, and to open our eyes to it. I think it's like a lot of things in our faith, whether it's miracles, whether it's, just seeing Jesus in the everyday life, or, everyday items. We have to be open to seeing that. And that is a great takeaway. Let's look at life through the lens of, being surprised by God's presence everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just a delightful way to even think about going through the week.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, because
And when people do lose loved ones, there's always signs and reminders, things that come into their lives that are, I mean, I just hear from too many people that, and
yeah,
it's that delightful surprise. So, the surprise of death is very real, and it's heavy. It's not very, it's always hard, but there's the other side of the story too.
absolutely, absolutely. Well, that is a great takeaway. And it's a busy week ahead. I feel like, you and I both work at schools, so life should slow down once the school year ends. But it doesn't. I know you're off for a little bit. I'm still,
I'm out.
working.
Yeah. Behind the scenes stuff, that the schools are systems, they're ecosystems, and they work because people like you are working when, yeah, it's true.
And I still actually, one of the most delightful surprises for me over the past year has been, this new job and the people that I've met, and that's
Yeah.
certainly been again a delightful surprise. But it's a big day coming up or a big week in Annapolis. Of course, next week we'll talk about the 4th of July, Independence Day. We can talk about that in a number of different forms, not just our country. It is induction day. They call it I Day here in Annapolis at the Naval Academy. So the new plebes, the freshmen, the new plebes arrived this week. So that's a delightful surprise for not many people. It is for the plebes. It's not for the parents. So we have good friends coming to stay with us this week as they drop their son off at the Naval Academy. So that's a
Yeah.
delightful surprise to have them here and to share these next 4 years with them. I mean, I'm
That's
really
true.
excited about that. He'll be our sponsor son. So I'm looking forward to that. But my takeaway along those lines this week is really, as we move towards the 4th of July and Independence Day and what that means for our country, and then, remembering and recognizing that we're, getting ready to add this new class of naval officers here, cadets at, West Point, out at the Air Force Academy. All the academies are
Yeah.
starting up this week. And, these are our next generation of military leaders. And who knows
Yeah.
what that will look like? The world's changing all the time. But, the military leaders 230, 40 some odd years ago, led us to the celebration we have next week. And, hopefully, I know that this next generation of military officers will as well. So praying for the military this week as we move towards, the holiday weekend next weekend.
Yeah. Can't wait. Yeah, my favorite holiday.
I know. I can't wait to hear more about that next week and why.
Yeah. Red, white, and blue. Let's do it. So,
all right. Sounds good.
Yeah.
Yep. Have a great week, Anne. And thank you to everyone listening in. We're praying for you as well. We hope you find a week of delightful surprises. And we look forward to sharing more of our delightful surprises with you as well.
Sounds good. Have a great week.
Thanks, Anne. You too.